Checking Transactions, a walkthrough. This is a checkbook register, and when you open a new account, you do so with typically a deposit. And with that account, they would give you a brand new check register. The other way you might be entering information into the check register is if you've had an account for a while with the bank and you've filled up a register and you are now starting a new register. In that case, you would be forwarding the last balance from your previous register and entering it into this new register in your balance forward. Let's take a look at the register for a second. So there are a number of columns. There's the number column, the date column, the description of transaction, and notice that the number and date row is deep, but under the description of transaction, it's divided into two rows. We have a 2 row and a 4 row within this complete transactions row. There's an amount of payment, and this vertical line represents the decimal point. This is the column where you check off which transactions have processed through the bank. There's the amount of deposit column, again with the vertical line midway through it representing the decimal point. So this would be any monies that you deposit into your account. And then we have the balance column. Again, the vertical line represents the decimal point. This is where you enter either the beginning balance, if this is a brand new account, or the amount that was the last balance amount from your previous checkbook register. So we're going to start by doing that. So we're going to start entering information. What you need to do is look at the Checking Transactions Worksheet number 2 for February. And we're going to be working our way through most of these transactions, but not all of them, because they get redundant after a while. So we're actually going to begin this register with a balance from our previous register of $100. So that's how you enter the amount. Not rocket science here. On the transaction worksheet, you'll notice it says on February 2, we're only going to do one transaction. We're going to make an ATM withdrawal of $21.50. So we're going to enter the date of February 2nd. In the description of transaction, on the 2 row, we're going to enter what the description was. So we performed an ATM withdrawal. On the 4 line, you could give the reason that you did this, to buy Mary a birthday present or to pay to fix my car, something. That the 4 is more like an explanation. So on the 2 row, we're going to put ATM withdrawal, and then we're going to enter the $21.50 under the amount of payment. We're going to take that $21.50 and we have to move it into the balance column. So we're going to subtract the $21.50 from our previous balance of $100, and on the next sub row right here, we're going to put what the total of 100 minus $21.50 is. So obviously that's $78.50. Back on the transactions worksheet, the next date is February 3rd. So we're going to, in that next row, and when I say the next row, I'm talking the deep row. In the next row, we're going to enter our next date when we had activity. Now, typically, as you make the activities, you are entering it into the checkbook register. That is always the best practice, because if you don't do it then, you may forget about a transaction. And that will, put your balance out of whack, and you could end up being withdrawn. You could bounce some checks, and so forth. So on February 3rd, our first activity is we're going to do a debit withdrawal at Walmart for $42.58. So on this deep rows 2 row under the description of transaction, we're going to put debit withdrawal. Go ahead and write that into your check register. On the 4-liner explanation, we're going to say that we did it at Walmart. We're going to enter the amount of $42.58. This is the amount that we withdrew from our account. And then again, we have to bring this amount into our balance column. So we're going to subtract $42.58 from $78.50, and that gives us a whopping $35.92. Still on February 3rd, we have a second transaction. So again, we're going to enter the date of 2/3, February 3rd. And what we did is we wrote out a check number 109, for $28.98. We wrote the check to Cleveland Press for paper products. So we need to record the check number in the number column. So again, it was check number 109. We wrote the check out to Cleveland Press. And then in the 4 row, we're going to enter paper products. This is a withdrawal. Again, we're taking money out. So we're going to put $28.98 under the amount of payment column. Again, this amount needs to be forwarded into the balance column, so we're going to subtract $28.98 from $35.92. And we now have a whopping bank account that has a whole $6.94 in it. Okay, so now that we've entered this check number 109's information into our register, we actually have to write out the check. So find check 109. Again, the check number is in the upper right-hand column. And you're going to write the date here on the date line. So February 3rd, 2015. I will just keep it 2014. Pretend this is last year. We're going to write in the pay to the order of, who are we writing this to? Cleveland Press. And again, your amount that you're writing the check out for goes here, and it goes in written as a number, as digits. So it's $28.98. On this next line, you're going to write out the same dollar amount in words. So $28.98. Some people like to stick the word dollar in here, but dollars is already over here. So to say $28.98 dollars is kind of redundant and just doesn't make sense. So $28.98 is fine. Then you will always put a line. If there is a space between the last letter that you have written and the word dollars, you're going to put a line there, because people are getting really good at forging, and you don't want to give them a space to somehow turn this into something else. So always put kind of this little squiggle line. If for class purposes, if you do not have this squiggle line, you will be losing points, so make sure it's there, okay? All right, next thing is we're going to put down here on the 4 line in the memo area that we're writing this check out for paper products. And then we have to sign our check. Go ahead and sign your name. You don't have to sign Mark L. Smith. But this is always in cursive. It's never printed. So if you haven't figured out how to write your name in cursive, now's a great time to start practicing. Okay, so we've written the check, and we're done with the check. So now theoretically we could stick it in an envelope and send it off to the Cleveland Press. So when we go back to the transactions worksheet, it's now February 4, and actually because our balance is so low, I'm going to add another transaction, and we're going to actually put some money in. So on the to line, you're going to write deposit. And what we're doing is Grandma sent us, it was our birthday yesterday, and Grandma gave us some money. So we're depositing this birthday money into our account. So again, on the for line, you're going to write birthday money. And Grandma wrote us a check for $25. So we're depositing, so under the deposit column, we're going to put $25. Forward that same amount into the balance column. So we're going to add plus $25. 25 plus $6.94 gives us a whopping balance of $31.94. Now, because we're depositing money into our account, we have to fill out a deposit slip. So find your deposit slips. They look like this. First thing we're going to do is put February 4th's date on the date line of the deposit slip. Now notice over here we have dollars and cents. Again, this vertical line is acting as our decimal point. If we are depositing cash, so dollar bills and coins, that gets totaled together and is entered on one line. If you are depositing checks, they get put in this area. So Grandma's check amount is going to go here. If Mom and Dad also gave us a check, that would go on this line. Each check is registered independently. And typically, banks like to have either the person that wrote the check, their last name here, or at least the check number. Except that we could have two checks that coincidentally are both numbered 1378. So that's why they oftentimes like to have the last name of the person who wrote the check. The next area down is the total from other side. We'll talk about that later on in this activity. So you would take all of this, add it to the total from the other side, and you'd get the subtotal. The next line, or the next row rather, has to do with any cash that you're going to be getting back. And then you've got your net deposit, the actual money that is going into your account. So, like I said, Grandma wrote us a check for $25 for our birthday. So we put check $13.78. $25. There's no total on the other side of this deposit slip. So our total is still $25. We're not getting any cash back from this deposit. So our net deposit is $25. All right, back to our check register. So it is still February 4th, and we have another transaction to do. We're going to do a debit withdrawal of $25 at the Getty gas station. So again, we're going to enter the date of February 4th. On the to line under the description of transaction, we're going to say debit withdrawal. In the for row, we're going to enter gas. We bought gas. And again, because it's a debit withdrawal, we're taking money out. It goes under the payment column. We're going to put our $25. Carry that $25 into the balance column. We're going to subtract that out. So $31.94 less $25 gives us a whopping $6.94. Look at that. History's repeating itself. All right, now we're going to skip over February 5 on the Checking Transactions worksheet, number 2 for February. We're going to go down to February 6th. Item number 1 says that we're going to deposit $550 of your $580 paychecks. We're depositing our paycheck, but we're only depositing $550 of it. This is check number 287, and we're going to put it into our checking account. Be sure to note the $30 cash back on your deposit slip. So, fill out your register first. So again, this is February 6th. Under the description, on the to line, in the to row, we're going to say deposit. We're going to note for ourselves that this was paycheck number 287. And on the for row, we're going to note that we're getting $30 cash back. You know, typically you would have the same amount going in every week or every 2 weeks. So if it's not a typical amount, you definitely want to make note of why it's not the typical amount. So again, it's a deposit. So under the amount of deposit column, we're going to write $550. Again, our paycheck is $580, but we're only depositing $550. So that's the only amount that we care about as far as the check register goes. Carry the same amount over to the balance forward. So we're going to add $550. So $694 plus $550 is $556.94. All right, so we've just put into our register that we're making a deposit. So find your deposit slips again. And we're going to complete another deposit slip. Again, the date is February 6th, 2014. We're not entering cash, we're entering a check. So, and especially because it's only one, we just have to do the check number. So it's check number 287. The amount of the check is $580. There still is no total from the other side. Sometimes you might have, say, 7 checks. Well, only 4 can fit here, so the other 3 you would record on the other side, subtotal the other side, and that subtotal gets put here. So again, our total here, $580. Now, it says less cash received. How much are we getting? Are we keeping out and not depositing? So that $30 we're going to put in this less cash received. So our net deposit, the money actually going into our checking account, is $550, that same amount that we noted in the register. Okay, so let's go back to the register. So we've got an ending balance on this page. There's usually a staple here, or maybe the staple, whoopsie, or maybe the staple was up at the top and this is the new page. In either case, you always want to bring your balance down to the next page. So the $556.94, we're going to rewrite here. Then enter the date again, still February 6th. And this time we're going to go down to item number 3, and we're going to write out a check number 111, for $48.64, and this check is going to be written to the Columbia Gas account number 9384453. So, under the number column, the check number column, we're going to write 111. In the description of transaction column, on the to line, what are we going to put? Columbia Gas. On the for line, are we going to put anything? You should say it's your January bill, because typically you get the bill at the end of the month, So the next month you have to pay the bill. So it's now February, we're going to pay last month's bill. So I'm noting that we wrote this check for the January bill. Because we're writing a check, which column does it go into? Hopefully you said the payment column. So the $48.64 goes in the payment amount. Bring it over to the balance forward and then subtotal it. So we're going to subtract the $48.64 from $556.94, and you should have gotten a balance of $508.30. So we've logged the transaction into our register of writing a check to Columbia Gas. Now we actually have to do it. So find your checks, locate check number 111. Again, check number is in the upper right-hand column. Start with the date. So what's our date? February 6th. Pay to the order of, who are we making this out to? Columbia Gas. Over here we put the dollar amount in numbers. So $48.64. And then the next line, we write that out in words. Again, 48.64 cents. Now, in this first check, in check number 109, I put and 98 cents. This is another well-accepted way of writing your change. 64 over 100 over a dollar. So it's 64 cents out of a dollar. However, you still need to do that little squiggle line because there's a lot of room left here. On the 4 line down here in the memo area, what do you think we're going to write? We're going to put our Columbia Gas account number. So it's account number 9384453. And then again, you need to sign your check. Go ahead and sign your name. It doesn't have to be Mark L. Smith, but it must be in cursive. Again, if it's not in cursive, the bank sometimes will not accept it as an actual check. So if you haven't figured out how to sign your name in cursive, make it look really pretty, now's a great time to practice. All right, so we've got check number 111 written out. We put it in the envelope. We send it off. We're going to skip down to February 10th. So back in our register, we're going to put February 10th as our date. Now on February 10th, the item says we're going to deposit a check number 395 for $25. We're going to deposit check number 489, which is for $38, and $40 in rolled quarters. Go ahead and fill out your register. I'll give you a couple of minutes and then I'll catch up to you. Okay, so are we writing a check? Nope, so there's no number. In the description on the 2 row, we're simply writing deposit. And the total of these 3 amounts comes to $103 and no cents. And again, that goes in our deposit column. This number gets carried over here. And then you take the 508.30 and add 103, and you should have gotten $611.30. Now, we just entered this into our register. Where do we go now? To our deposit slips. Go ahead, I'll give you a little bit of time here to fill in your deposit slip for this transaction. Okay, so first thing you should do is put the date, February 10, 2014. Are we depositing cash? Yes, we are. $40 in rolled quarters. That's cash. We're also depositing 2 checks. So we're going to say check number 395 for $25. And we're also going to deposit check number 489 for $38. We're not depositing any other checks. So do we have a total from the other side? Nope. So we're just going to put a line through that. And we're going to subtotal these 3 amounts. So you should have $103. Are we getting any cash back? Nope. So our net deposit is still the 103.